The first scent hit me hard. That sweet, rotting stench twisted my gut and set off every instinct screaming danger. I was checking the still when I found the tracks. 18 inches long, sunk deep into the Wyoming mud. 5 toes, human-like, but 3 times the size. That's when I knew my moonshining had attracted something that shouldn't even exist. My name's Jake Harland, and for the past 8 years I've been running a secret corn whiskey still up in the Wind River Range. Not exactly legal, but out here, the feds are the least of your worries. This wilderness swallows men whole. Grizzlies, mountain lions, winters that plunge to 40 below. But nothing prepared me for what started happening at my camp in the fall of 2019. I'd been distilling in the same spot for 3 years. It was perfect natural spring water, thick pine cover, and a network of caves that kept my smoke hidden. The nearest town was 37 miles away over rough country. No roads, no trails, just wilderness most folks wouldn't step into without a guide. The first sign something was off showed up in September. I'd left a batch of mashed potatoes fermenting while I ran into town for supplies. Takes about 5 days to ferment properly at that temperature. When I got back, the camp didn't look right. Everything was where I'd left it, but the air felt wrong, like someone had checked my fire pit without touching a thing. Then I saw the footprints around the fire. Not bear prints, I know bear prints. These were different. Human-like but huge, strides so long no man could match them. Nearly 6 feet between steps. Whatever left them had walked right through my camp, paused at the still, and gone back into the trees. I should have packed up then and there, torn everything down, and found a new spot. But I had 12 gallons of top-shelf shine ready to bottle and a buyer waiting, the kind of buyer who doesn't like delays. So I stayed, loaded my rifle, and tried to convince myself it was just some kind of prank. That night, I heard wood knocks. 3 deliberate hits on a tree about 200 yards from camp. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder. I've heard woodpeckers, falling branches, every normal noise the woods can make. This was different. This was intentional. I didn't sleep, just sat there with my back to a boulder, rifle across my lap, staring at the trees. Around 3 a.m., a flicker of light appeared at the edge of the fire. Too high for a wolf, too steady for an owl. Whatever it was, it stood there for 20 minutes while I watched. Then it melted into the darkness without a sound. Next morning, I found where it had stood. More tracks, and the ground pressed down like something heavy had shifted its weight back and forth. Broken branches 9 feet up, where it had gripped the trees for support. That's when the height hit me, 9 feet tall. What in God's creation stands 9 feet tall and walks on 2 legs? I had a choice: pack up and lose everything I'd built, or stay and risk another encounter. The smart money was on leaving, but I wasn't smart. I was stubborn. This was my territory, my operation. I'd handled poachers, federal raids, and every predator the Rockies could throw at me. I wasn't about to be run off by some giant ape, so I adapted. Started leaving scraps at the edge of camp. Nothing fancy, just leftovers from my meals. Beans, cornbread, jerky. Every morning the food was gone. No mess, no scattered crumbs like you'd see with bears, just gone. And always those massive tracks leading back into the woods. 2 weeks of this routine, and then something extraordinary happened. One evening I was tending the still, adjusting the condenser temp, when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, heavy, careful. My rifle was leaning against a tree 20 feet away, felt like it had walked 20 miles. I turned slowly, hands visible, trying not to make any sudden moves. And there it was, 3 meters of muscle and dark brown hair, standing at the edge of my camp like it belonged there. Its face almost human, but not quite. It was even bigger up close, its deep-set eyes catching the firelight. The smell rolling off it was overwhelming, like wet dog mixed with damp earth, something older, more primal. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, though it was maybe 30 seconds. Then I did something that surprised us both. I spoke to it. "Easy now, big fella. I don't want any trouble." The creature tilted its head, processing the sound. Its nostrils flared, maybe catching my scent, weighing me up threat or not. Then it did something that changed everything. It sat down, just dropped into a crouch like a man about to talk, still towering over me even seated. I started rambling about the still, the weather, anything that came to mind. My voice seemed to calm it, or maybe it was just curious about the strange little human making noise. Either way, it stayed for an hour, listening, tilting its head when I switched topics. When it finally rose to leave, it stopped at the pile of scraps I'd left out. Instead of grabbing them, it looked at me, then at the food, then back again like it was asking permission. I nodded and told it to go ahead. It picked up the leftovers with a gentleness that didn't fit its size and vanished into the trees. That became our routine. Every few nights it would show up at the edge of camp. I'd talk, it would listen, then take the food and leave. I started calling it Moses. Don't ask me why. The name just fit a figure stepping in and out of the wilderness, like some biblical mystery. After a month, Moses grew bolder. He'd come closer to the fire, sometimes within 10 feet. That's when I could finally see the details. The hair wasn't even like a bear's, longer on the arms and shoulders, shorter across the face and chest. The hands were enormous, but perfectly proportioned, with thumbs and nails like ours, not claws. Those were the same feet that left those wide, flat tracks, the arches curved like something evolved for walking upright. But it was the intelligence in those eyes that held me. This wasn't an animal acting on instinct. Moses was thinking, weighing, learning. He started picking up on my routines. On bottling days, he'd show up right as I finished, knowing I'd be tired and sitting still. On heavy production days, he kept his distance, as if he understood I needed full focus. Then one night, he showed me just how smart he was. I woke up without knowing why not from a sound but a presence. Opening my eyes, I saw Moses standing beside me, one huge hand raised as if to signal, "Stop." Before I could react, he pointed toward the trail coming down off the ridge. That's when I heard them, voices, still distant but closing fast. Federal agents, for sure nobody else would be hiking these trails at 2 a.m. Moses looked at me, then at the still, then back at me. The meaning was clear. He understood what would happen if they found my setup. I jumped up and started tearing apart the still, the condenser, the copper coil, anything that screamed illegal distillery. Moses watched for a moment, then did something that still gives me chills. He started helping. He hefted 2 50-pound sacks of cracked corn like they were pillows and carried them into the cave. Then he came back for the fermenting barrel, moving with a speed that didn't seem possible for something that size. We worked in total silence, him following my lead, anticipating what needed to move next. Within 15 minutes, we'd erased every sign of the operation. Then Moses did something even more astonishing. He went to the trail the agents would take and began snapping branches, scuffing up the ground, laying down false tracks leading away from my camp. He wasn't just hiding me, he understood how trackers think. I grabbed my camping gear and staged the camp to look like a hiker's overnight stop. Moses slipped back into the forest, but I could feel him watching. 20 minutes later, 3 ATF agents strode into camp, flashlights blazing, weapons ready. Federal agents like I couldn't see the letters stamped on their jackets. "We're investigating reports of illegal distilling in this area," one said. I played the part of a confused hiker, rubbing my eyes, asking what was going on. They searched the camp and found nothing but standard camping gear and a little jerky. One of them noticed the tracks Moses had left earlier, and his whole demeanor changed. "Seen any bears around here?" he asked, though his voice said he knew those weren't bear tracks. "No, sir," I answered. "But something big came through yesterday. Didn't get a good look at it." They glanced at each other, and I caught something on their faces I hadn't expected. Fear. These weren't local boys. They didn't know these mountains, but they knew enough to realize those tracks belonged to something they didn't want to meet in the dark. They left within the hour, saying they'd push on before dawn. As their voices faded down the trail, Moses stepped out of the trees. He walked straight to the cave and began carrying my equipment back out, not at random, but placing every piece exactly where it had been. He had memorized the entire layout of my operation. That's when it hit me this wasn't just some primitive forest dweller. Moses was capable of complex reasoning. He understood law enforcement, concealment, misdirection. He wasn't protecting my still because he cared about moonshine. He recognized the shared benefit of our arrangement. I handled the food. He handled security. Our partnership grew from there. Moses started bringing me things. At first, it was firewood. Perfectly dried logs, cut to length, stacked neatly beside my fire pit. The only trace of his visit were those massive tracks leading back into the trees. Then he brought kindling pine cones, resinous sticks, the kind that catch fast. Somehow he understood I needed different materials for different fires, so I upped his food ration in return. I started cooking an extra portion just for him. Turned out he had a sweet tooth for cornbread drizzled with honey. He'd let out this low rumble while eating, almost a purr. The sound came from deep in his chest, nothing like any animal I'd ever heard before. With winter closing in, I began to worry about him. Wyoming's snow is merciless, and I didn't know if he had proper shelter. One night I tried to explain. I pointed to the sky, shivered theatrically, then gestured toward the caves. He seemed to understand, but shook his head. Then he motioned for me to follow. I grabbed my rifle and flashlight, though Moses moved through the darkness like he could see just fine. We hiked a mile over terrain I would have struggled with even in daylight. He'd pause to check on me, sometimes offering a steadying hand on the rougher climbs. Finally, he led me to a cave system I'd never seen before. The entrance was hidden behind what looked like a natural rockfall, but had clearly been arranged. Inside, it was warm. Not just warmer than outside, genuinely warm. Moses had found a geothermal vent and built his shelter around it. The cave was organized, a sleeping area, a place for meals, and what looked like a tool cache. Yes, tools. Stones shaped for digging. Sticks sharpened for leverage. Moses wasn't just intelligent. He was a tool user, a builder, a creature with culture and practical knowledge. He guided me through the chambers like a proud host, showing how he'd diverted water from an underground spring into a natural basin, how he stacked stones to trap heat from the vent. In one corner, bones were sorted by size. Some were deer, some elk. Others were unmistakably bear. Moses was an apex predator capable of taking down a grizzly. But what struck me most were the walls. They were covered in carvings, not writing exactly, but deliberate patterns etched into stone. Some were symbolic trees, mountains, animals. Others were abstract, maybe counting systems or calendars. Moses was recording his world. At one point, he pointed to a particular carving, then to me, then back again. It was a crude but recognizable outline of a still. My still. He'd woven my work into his history. I was now part of his story, just as he had become part of mine. The walk back to camp was quiet, almost comfortable. Somewhere along the line, we'd crossed an invisible boundary from tolerance into trust. Moses had welcomed me into his world, and without realizing it, I'd done the same. When winter came, our routine shifted. Moses visited less often, maybe conserving energy during the harshest months. But when he came, he stayed longer, sometimes hours by the fire. I told him everything about my ex-wife, about kids who wouldn't speak to me anymore, about how I used to run mountains for sport. Moses listened intently, offering soft grunts in response, not words, but emotional echoes. He seemed sympathetic when I spoke of loss, amused when I told jokes, concerned when I mentioned danger. He understood tone, context, even nuance. This wasn't animal reaction. This was genuine understanding. One January night, the temperature plunged to 30 below. My camp stove was useless, and I was burning through firewood too fast. I truly thought I might freeze to death. Then Moses appeared, carrying an armload of fat wood, so resin-rich it burned hot and long. He knew exactly what I needed. He stacked the logs, then did something new. He sat down beside me. His enormous frame blocked the wind, radiating heat like a living furnace. We stayed that way all night, me tending the fire, him keeping the cold at bay. At dawn, when the temperature lifted from deadly to merely brutal, Moses rose to leave. But before he did, he set a massive hand on my shoulder. Heavy, but gentle. Maybe it was recognition, maybe gratitude, maybe just connection. Then he walked into the trees, leaving only tracks in the memory of warmth. February brought new trouble. A rival bootlegger named Curtis Hobbs started sniffing around, looking for my still. He'd been undercutting me in town, boasting he had better product and that my operation wouldn't last much longer. I knew what that meant. He was hunting my setup, planning to steal my equipment or tip off the feds. One evening, I told Moses about Hobbs, his look, his truck, the danger he posed. Moses listened harder than usual, eyes narrowing when I mentioned how Hobbs had threatened other moonshiners in the past. sometimes violently. 3 days later, Hobbs showed up at my camp while I was mid-run on a batch. Couldn't shut it down without ruining the mash. Couldn't defend myself without leaving the equipment behind. He'd picked his moment perfectly. Well, he sneered, stepping into the clearing with a pistol in hand. Jake Harland, the legend himself. You've got a tidy little setup here. I kept working, forcing calm. This is private land, Curtis. You're trespassing. He laughed, a grating sound bouncing off the rocks. No one owns this wilderness, friend. Just opportunity. I think you're due for an accident. Stills have a way of exploding. Real shame that. He edged closer, gun half raised, and then we heard it. A roar. It shook the snow from the trees. Not a bear, not a mountain lion. Deeper, more primal, laced with fury. Every hair on my body stood up. Hobbs spun, pistol snapping up just as Moses stepped from the tree line. But this wasn't the gentle giant who shared my fire. This was a predator defending his ground. Moses stood tall, arms spread wide, sheer bulk dwarfing the man with the gun. Another roar split the air, and I saw Hobbs's hands tremble. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, stumbling back a step. Moses advanced slowly, deliberately, eyes locked on the intruder. Hobbs leveled the pistol, and I was sure he'd fire. But Moses was smarter than that. He grabbed a pine trunk as thick as my thigh and twisted. The wood splintered like a gunshot. The 9-meter tree crashed down between them, forcing Hobbs to stumble back to avoid being crushed. When Hobbs stumbled back, Moses was already standing tall on the fallen tree, his eyes locked on the frightened moonshiner even from 20 feet away. The message was unmistakable. Leave this place or vanish into the wilderness. Hobbs panicked, dropped his revolver, and ran as if the devil himself was chasing him. Minutes later, the roar of his truck engine echoed through the valley, tires spinning on the snow as he fled. He never returned. Word soon spread that my still was guarded by something unnatural, and other moonshiners steered clear. Moses lingered until he was certain the danger had passed. Then his stance shifted from fierce to concerned. He came closer, inspecting me carefully, sniffing the air as if to check for fear or injury. When satisfied, he did something I never expected. He embraced me. It wasn't exactly a human hug, but a powerful enclosure, his long arms pulling me against his chest. I could hear his heart pounding fast with the aftershock of adrenaline. We stood like that for a few moments before he stepped back. I wanted to thank him, but words felt useless. Instead, I placed my hand on his arm. His massive hand closed gently over mine, and in silence we understood each other. As spring crept in, Moses began bringing me offerings from the forest. Not only firewood, but curiosities, antlers shed by deer, smooth stones, even a flawless eagle feather that must have taken him hours to find. He would present each gift solemnly, watching for my reaction before setting it down near the tent. I repaid him not only with food, but with practical gifts: a steel knife, a tarp for his shelter, and a pair of work gloves absurdly small on his hands, but treasured nonetheless. He examined every item with care, turning them over and testing their use. The gloves especially fascinated him. He traced the seams again and again. Within days, I discovered a deer hide pouch he had sewn himself with plant fibers, crude but functional. Moses wasn't only a tool user, he was an inventor. In May, I had to leave for an extended trip. Usually I was gone no more than 2 days, but this time Denver distributors meant at least a week away. I tried to explain with gestures, 7 stones for 7 days, pointing to myself, the trail, and back again. He seemed unsettled, pacing and muttering low, worried about the disruption. I left enough food for 2 weeks and departed. The trip stretched into 9 days after my truck broke down outside Laramie. The whole time I worried, would Moses think I had abandoned him? Would he still trust me when I returned? But when I finally came back, the camp was immaculate. The still gleamed, polished brass shining. The firewood was stacked in perfect order. Even the ground around the tent had been cleared of debris. Moses had cared for it all. That night he appeared, but he hung back, sitting farther from the fire, watching me with something like hurt in his eyes. I spoke more than I had in months, explaining the truck trouble and showing him the supplies I had brought back. Slowly, he drew nearer until at last we sat together as before. Then I presented a gift, a chocolate bar with almonds. He sniffed it, nibbled the tiniest bite, and his face lit up with pure wonder. He savored it for an hour, closing his eyes after each taste as though committing it to memory. In that moment, I realized just how solitary his existence was. I had never seen another like him. No calls answered, no tracks except his own. He was utterly alone. Our companionship had become something deeper than convenience or survival. It was true friendship, two outsiders finding connection in an unlikely wilderness. By summer, Moses adapted to the growing dangers: more hikers, federal patrols, and the constant threat of wildfire. His watch over the forest grew sharper. He developed a system of signals: 2 knocks for hikers, 3 for lawmen, a long scrape for urgent danger. Sometimes he combined sounds to indicate direction and distance, like a living Morse code. One afternoon in July, his warning came just in time. A scrape, followed by rapid knocks, sent me covering the still. Seconds later, a Forest Service helicopter thundered overhead, scanning for illegal stills. If not for Moses, I would have been caught red-handed. They circled twice, saw only a solitary camper under a tarp, then moved on. When the noise faded, Moses stepped out of the trees. Moses watched the helicopter with a hunter's intensity, his eyes narrowing as the machine roared across the sky. Until then, threats had always come from the ground. Now, he understood, danger could descend from above. Within days, his vigilance evolved. He began scanning the heavens as faithfully as he scanned the trees, his ear quick to catch the thrum of rotor blades miles away. Soon he had memorized the patrol schedule, slipping through the wilderness unseen, a phantom who timed his movements with uncanny precision. That August, lightning set the Bennett fire raging. 10 miles north, the flames tore southward, driven straight for my camp. I was preparing to flee when Moses appeared in broad daylight, unsettled as I had never seen him. He didn't point south, where the fire roared, but east, into land unknown. I argued for the road to the west, toward men and safety, but he would not relent. With a grip strong as iron, he pulled me eastward. I had to choose: civilization or him. The look in his eyes decided it. We plunged into wild canyons and ridges I never knew existed. His path was harsh but deliberate. After hours of climbing, he led me beneath a vast granite overhang, a fortress of stone encircled by barren rock. The fire swept past in a storm of smoke and fury, but the flames could not touch us there. Moses had read the wind, measured the fire's speed, and known the western roads would choke with desperate souls. He had led me to life when my instincts would have led me to death. For 2 days we hid in that shelter. He fetched water from a hidden stream, dug up roots and berries no man would recognize, and shared them without hesitation. When at last we returned, my camp stood unharmed. The fire had burned to within half a mile, then died exactly where he had foreseen. From that day forward, my faith in him was unshakable. The Rockies turned to gold with autumn. Elk called through the valleys, and Moses grew restless, roaming farther than ever. Perhaps it was the season of his kind, yet he always returned, bringing gifts. An arrowhead chipped from flint, sharp and ancient, a chunk of turquoise, blue as the western sky. These treasures he placed in my hands as if entrusting me with the relics of a forgotten people. I gave him gifts in return, and knowledge. Simple things at first: knots, blades, weather signs. He learned faster than any man. Within days he invented knots no book has ever shown. The knife became his prize, and soon he wore it in a sheath of elk hide he stitched himself. His craft grew finer with every passing week, as if centuries of human invention were unfolding again in his hands. When the first snows fell, the strangers came government men, scientists, with cameras and machines to measure what should not be measured. Moses sensed them first and grew uneasy. He knew, as I did, that their devices could tear away his secrecy. Together we planned. I played the friendly local, distracting them with drink and stories. He became a shadow, slipping through their traps without leaving a trace. Even the cleverest among them, a woman named Dr. Chen, could not outwit him. She followed me one night, but Moses led her astray with noises and signs so subtle she never guessed. At dawn she returned, shaken, whispering words I will never forget. There's something out there, something intelligent, something that does not wish to be found. Not long after, they left, perhaps satisfied, perhaps afraid. I never did learn which of their devices failed, but they left behind cameras still humming, solar panels still feeding them. Moses and I spent an entire day dismantling each machine, burning memory cards, wiping every trace of proof they might have gathered. That night, something changed. He made sounds I had never heard, structured, rhythmic, not human speech, but not random either. He was trying to talk. Not with gestures, not with gifts, but with a language of his own. I answered clumsily, echoing his tones, searching for patterns. We spoke like that for hours. It was crude, broken, but the effort itself was monumental. For the first time, he was reaching across the gulf between species, trying to build a bridge of words. November brought merciless storms. Snow fell heavy, winds cut sharp, and the cold pressed harder than iron. Supplies dwindled, and I dared not risk the road to town. Moses noticed before long. He saw me rationing food, burning less fuel, growing thinner. Soon he came back with offerings. Rabbit one day, turkey the next. Always cleaned, always prepared, in the way he knew I ate. He had watched me long enough to understand. The most moving moment came during a blizzard that trapped me in my tent for 3 days. The wind tore like claws at the canvas, water ran low, and the cold sank through every layer I wore. On the second night, I heard digging outside. Moses was building a wall of snow, piling it high around my tent to break the wind. Hour after hour, he labored in conditions that could have killed a man in minutes. When it was finished, the difference was immediate. The tent held fast, and he never left. For 3 days, he stayed near, guarding the wall, melting snow for water, sharing his own body heat when the night was at its worst. When the storm finally broke and the world glittered like glass under the sun, I knew we were no longer just companions. We were family. December brought new dangers. Word of strange wildlife in the Wind River Range had reached a film crew. They arrived with drones, thermal cameras, and a hunger for proof. Unlike the scientists before, these men weren't stumbling near the truth, they were hunting it. Moses felt it keenly. He paced, growled, snapped trees in frustration. His sanctuary was under siege, his very existence threatened. Any other creature would have vanished into deeper wilderness. But he stayed. He stayed because I was there. That loyalty made me feel smaller than I ever had. Together we fought back, not with claws or guns, but with cunning. I listened in on their radios with a town-bought scanner. Moses learned to hear drones long before they crested the tree line. We laid false trails, planted misleading signs, crafted a story in the dirt and snow so convincing it would have fooled the devil himself. They followed shadows for 2 weeks, growing weary, until they left empty-handed on Christmas Eve. That night, I cooked a feast with the last of my stores: cornbread stuffing, venison stew, even a rough apple pie of dried fruit and honey. Moses came as I set it out, drawn by the scent on the frozen air. We ate together in silence, companionable and deep. He sampled each dish with care, savoring every bite. And I savored the rarest gift of all, sharing Christmas supper with a friend the world swore did not exist. When the Christmas feast was over, I gave Moses a small but meaningful gift: an old army blanket, thick wool, made to last for decades. He examined it with wonder, running his hand across the tight weave, testing its warmth. An hour later, he returned with a gift of his own. At first glance, it was just a rock, but inside lay something extraordinary: a split crystal, revealing purple facets that glittered in the firelight. He had carried it for who knows how long, saving it for the right moment to share. January 2020 brought a nightmare. A federal raid, ATF, Forest Service, even DEA backed by helicopters and dogs. Clearly someone had tipped them off, perhaps Hobbs in one final act of vengeance. Moses gave me 10 minutes of warning. Too little to hide everything, just enough to destroy the most incriminating evidence. As I poured liquor over the still, preparing to burn it all, Moses did something unprecedented. He revealed himself, not directly, but with calculated precision. He appeared before the dogs. One glance through the trees was enough to send the German shepherds into a panic, bolting back to their handlers, tails tucked, refusing to obey despite shouts and prods. Then came the trees, great trunks cracking and crashing like thunder, echoing through the valley. The agents moved in, weapons ready, trying to stay calm, but fear rippled through every motion, every command. When one reported seeing a massive, two-legged shape among the trees, the commander ordered an immediate retreat. We worked through the night. Moses hauled away the equipment I could never move alone, while I directed the desperate effort to erase all traces. By sunrise, my camp looked like nothing more than the shabby refuge of a hermit. The feds searched for 2 days, finding nothing but leaving behind vague threats. Yet I saw it in their eyes. They sensed something in the forest, something that made them want to leave as fast as possible. Moses had turned primal fear into a weapon. February brought a different trial: sickness. A brutal respiratory infection left me weak, burning with fever. In civilization, it would mean antibiotics and bed rest. Out here, it could mean death. Moses knew before I did. As I slipped into delirium, he took over completely, bringing water, tending the fire, even figuring out my camp stove when the woodpile dwindled. He brought medicine too: pine needle tea and willow bark, remedies that truly helped break the fever. For 3 days, I drifted in and out, and every time I opened my eyes, he was there. He made low, resonant sounds like a cat's purr, but deeper, rolling through the chest that soothed me in my misery. On the 4th day, the fever broke. I awoke clear-headed, though weak as a newborn, to find Moses asleep against a rock outside my tent, exhausted after days without rest. When he stirred and realized I was awake, relief lit his face unmistakably. He brought me soup he had cooked in my pot with the ingredients he had gathered. It was delicious, wild herbs, rich with strength. We sat together in silence as I ate, while he watched each spoonful with the quiet care of a worried parent. And I had to fight hard not to cry at the gentleness of that legendary soup.